Sean Diddy Combs is now the subject of a federal criminal investigation, and he was just hit with another lawsuit, and he's planning to sell his massive mansion. Well, we're going to discuss some massive new developments in the ongoing legal saga of the music producer, all with renowned celebrity attorney Bradford Cohen. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, there are some more interesting things happening right now in the Sean Diddy Combs story that we want to talk to you about. Is it that, I don't know, Combs is reportedly now the subject of a federal investigation? Or how about the fact that there's a new lawsuit that has been filed against the rapper? Or that it's being reported he's trying to sell his house for $70 million in the middle of all this? Or how about the fact that a key figure seemingly wants to testify against him? Obviously, a lot to talk about. We're going to get into it all. But this is an interesting time for Sean Diddy Combs, and we have discussed this extensively here on Sidebar. He's currently facing multiple lawsuits since November 2023, alleging sexual assault, sex trafficking, harassment, illegal drugs and firearms possession, violence, intimidation. The lawsuit we're going to talk about today is just another one of those. His homes in LA and Miami were raided by federal agents, reportedly pursuant to an ongoing human trafficking investigation by the Southern District of New York. Now, no arrests have been made, no charges have been filed, but it has been reported that a grand jury out in New York has been impaneled. And we know one of the reasons prosecutors use a grand jury is to seek an indictment. Now, what else has happened with Combs? We know that CNN published a video purportedly of Combs in 2016 savagely beating his ex-girlfriend Cassandra Ventura in a hotel elevator bank. He issued an apology on Instagram 2 days after the release. He's since deleted all of the posts from his Instagram account, including that apology video. His longtime entertainment law firm, Grubman, Shire, Masalis, and Sachs, has dropped him as a client. This is a firm of high-powered attorney Alan Grubman. We talked about that on a previous Sidebar. Howard University, the private historically black university out of Washington, D.C., has rescinded its honorary degree that it awarded Combs back in 2014. Combs reportedly stepped down as chairman and sold his shares of Revolt TV. CNN has reported that the fitness powerhouse Peloton has removed Combs' music from its platform. Playing of his songs has gone significantly down across airwaves. He returned the key to New York City that was presented to him by Mayor Eric Adams last year. Miami Beach has revoked its Sean Diddy Combs Day after a vote by the city commissioners. This was an annual holiday in effect since October 2016. So clearly a lot of fallout and happenings. But now we have to talk about some new developments. And for these new developments, let me bring in criminal defense attorney and civil trial lawyer Bradford Cohen, who knows a thing or two about representing celebrities. His roster includes Drake, Kodak Black, Lil Wayne. He's been talking about the Diddy case with us since the beginning. Bradford, so good to see you. Lot to talk about here. I want to start with what I think is arguably one of the biggest developments, and that is that it's being reported that Sean Combs' attorneys were notified last week that he is the subject of that federal investigation by the Southern District of New York. What does it mean to be the subject of a federal criminal investigation?
So there's several levels to federal criminal investigations. One of them is being a subject. That means that they're looking into criminal allegations against an individual, but it's not as high level as, say, a target. A target is essentially they're very close to getting an indictment. They're going to get an indictment, and they invite you to come in to speak to them before they get the indictment or to work out a deal before they arrest you. When you know that you're a target, and they don't necessarily always tell people, hey, you're a target or a subject. They usually send those letters out to see if they want to come in and cooperate, or they have any evidence they want to present, or they want to have a discussion. I think the fact that they sent the letter saying that he's a subject, I think they already knew that. Once your house gets raided by the feds, you are either a subject or a target, more likely a target than a subject. It's interesting that they sent out this letter saying that he's a subject, but I think that his lawyers are already speaking to the Southern District of New York, and they know kind of what's going on and that there's a federal indictment that could be on the horizon.
And it can sway. You can be a subject, and it could be upgraded to a target. Do you notify Combs' legal team because the idea, as you say, they bring him in, that they want to work out a deal? Or is it because, hey, listen, We've been looking at some things. We'd like to give you an opportunity to explain yourself. Is that more what we're looking at?
Yeah, usually the latter. When you're a subject, it's like they're not asking you to come in and give them, a reason to charge you with a lesser crime or things of that nature. That's more of a target. When you're a subject, usually what happens is they're saying, hey, we're looking at these things. Do you have any evidence to give us to the other side of this? And generally, they don't do that a lot. I think they're doing it in this case because it's a high profile case. They don't want to say they never gave him an opportunity to present any evidence that they could present to a grand jury to vitiate these allegations. There's these allegations that he's done X, Y, and Z. If he says, hey, listen, I wasn't even in the state of California at the time this girl said that I was here, or I wasn't in the state of New York at the time the girl said I was here.
Yeah.
That gives them an opportunity to present that, and then the government can take a look at it and see if they're going to, incorporate that into their grand jury testimony.
Very interesting you talk about that, because now I'm wondering about timing, right? It's no surprise, we've talked about it here on Sidebar before, that it wouldn't be a shocker if he's ultimately hit with charges. Not a definite, we don't know for sure. We clearly do not know what's happening behind the scenes, but we see all these lawsuits. We know his houses were raided months ago. We talked about the possible being reported a grand jury has been impaneled. Does this give you any insight into the potential timing of criminal charges in this case?
Yeah, I mean, listen, after a raid, generally, I say there's like a 90-day period where they meet, they discuss the charges, they go in front of a grand jury, they discuss charges in front of a grand jury, present evidence, present witnesses. And usually there's this 90-day window, maybe a 120-day window, but it's usually within anywhere from 3 to 5 months that they put together an indictment, depending on how vast it is. I mean, I've seen it closer to 60 days. It just depends on what they're investigating. But I had a client whose house was raided about 45 days ago, and they're asking, hey, do you have any information that can assist us in what charges we think we may file, what charges we may not? So my guess is, if I was just putting money down, I would say towards the end of the summer, I think they're going to have an indictment. I don't see how any evidence that he has is going to sway them to the contrary, especially where they have this grand jury that has been meeting. My guesstimate is for at least 45 days, and they've been providing evidence. They usually don't waste their time on a grand jury meeting and presenting evidence and then not file any charges whatsoever.
Now, I will say in his defense, right, he is innocent until proven guilty. He hasn't been formally
100%.
accused by anything. But I will say we've covered a number of cases where his defense team has raised a number of really good legal defenses on the civil front. One of them was that the fact is he's being hit with certain causes of action claims that are invalid, he says, because the statute you're suing me under wasn't even in existence when these allegations happened. So his legal team will, like you said, it kind of hit me, if he's going to say, I can prove to you I wasn't in this location when I'm accused of doing X, Y, and Z. And by the way, before I get into the lawsuit, it reminds me, how much do they share with him or his attorneys of the potential charges or the case they have against him? They share everything, or do they share just bits and pieces?
So generally speaking, and I've dealt with the Southern District of New York quite a few times, usually they share bits and pieces, if they share anything at all. They'll say, this is what we're looking at, sometimes X, Y, and Z. They might not give you details. I mean, it's not hard to figure out these lawsuits that are coming at him fast and furious, and the type of incidents that he's had in the past and the type of trouble that he's had in the past. I think it's pretty easy to figure out where they're going with it. And my guess is they're going to put together some sort of very long, encompassing indictment where it encompasses crimes that have taken place over a period of time in a sort of ongoing criminal conspiracy type situation. That's my guess. Again, and like I always say, everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Even if they indict him, he still has the right to a trial. And so long story short is that's usually where it goes. That's kind of my feeling on this case, is that they're going to try and incorporate everything they can from his past. I wouldn't be surprised if they go back to, prior shootings that he's been accused of, prior gun possessions that he's been accused of. There was some incidences of violence with other rappers that they may say he had some kind of hand in those other incidences. So that's what I think they're going to do, is put together an encompassing indictment that throws everything at the wall. So for them to tell them, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're looking at, I don't think that's the case in this matter.
Hey everybody, I want to take a minute to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law & Crime YouTube takeover. If you've seen our videos, you know Morgan & Morgan is a proud sponsor of Law & Crime, and that our content proves the world isn't always the safest place. And when you're hurt, that can be very confusing. It can be scary. You don't really know where to turn. But Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, can help. They're the largest injury law firm because they win a lot. Verdicts and settlements in the multi-millions. They also make it super easy for their clients because uploading documents, signing contracts, starting your claim can all be done on your smartphone. Also, there's zero upfront fee. You only pay them if you win. So if you've ever been injured in an accident, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. You can start a claim in 8 clicks or less without even having to leave your couch. To start your claim, visit forthepeople.com/YouTube takeover. So now I want to get your thoughts and opinion on this major development, another development. And that is that Combs was just hit with another lawsuit. This is now, I think, the 10th lawsuit within the past year. And this one is from former adult film star Adria English, and she filed a 114-page federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York. So again, the same district where we're seeing this federal investigation, reportedly this federal investigation. And she's filed this lawsuit against Sean Combs. She's filed it against other defendants, and she's basically making claims of sex trafficking and sexual assault, that she was, quote, used as a sexual pawn for the pleasure and financial benefit of others during Combs' infamous white parties, these parties that happened in the Hamptons in New York and Miami, where everybody dressed up in white attire. And she claims that Combs forced her into prostitution for years. She said that Combs forced her to take drugs before she was, quote, passed off to others. And she claims that she was demanded to have sex, for instance, with celebrity jeweler Jacob the Jeweler Arabo, who is listed as a defendant in this complaint. And she claims that Combs threatened to blackmail her and her boyfriend from the entertainment industry if she didn't do what he wanted. Combs' attorney, by the way, Jonathan Davis, released a statement saying, no matter how many lawsuits are filed, it won't change the fact that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted or sex trafficked anyone. We live in a world where anyone can file a lawsuit for any reason without any proof. Fortunately, a fair and impartial judicial process exists to find the truth, and Mr. Combs is confident he will prevail against these and other baseless claims in court. Now, she is suing under various causes of action, such as violation of the federal racketeering statute, sexual assault, sexual harassment, violation of the New York City Victims of Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Act, violation of Trafficking and Victims Protection Act, aiding and abetting a sex trafficking enterprise, negligent and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It's a massive lawsuit, Bradford, but again, very consistent with the other lawsuits that have been filed. What are your thoughts?
You know, when I read some of these lawsuits, it's very hard to differentiate the lawsuits that have value to them and the lawsuits that are being just piggybacked onto everything else. When you read this lawsuit, it seems to me, when I look at the individual that's filing it, and be it right or wrong, the industry that individual was involved in, and then I look at the allegations and whether or not those allegations would be able to be proven through other individuals. This is one of those lawsuits that I think is a piggyback onto everything else. I think that, and his lawyer is right, when you open up the floodgates, and I say this to my clients quite often, a lot of my clients say, hey, I got hit, this person's threatening me with a lawsuit. If they file this lawsuit, it's total BS. We should fight it, blah, blah, blah. I said, listen, there's a couple different ways to go about this. There's either one way to go about it, even on the BS lawsuits, is to settle it out for, what you would be paying a lawyer, 100 grand, 50 grand, 75 grand, whatever you think that you would be paying a lawyer to answer that complaint. But then you have to look at the things that aren't a cost. When that lawsuit gets filed, are you going to lose, is everyone going to ditch you? Are you going to lose, your Adidas? You're going to lose your Nike sponsorship, all these different sponsorships. So they're just going to walk away from you, not because the lawsuit is true, but because of the allegations in the lawsuit. So those are things to consider. Then if a lawsuit actually gets filed, you have no choice but to go to war over the lawsuit, because if you settle that lawsuit and you settle it quickly, there is blood in the water and all the sharks come to feed. And that's what you saw with the Diddy lawsuit. He said, no, I'm not going to settle with her. I'm not going to settle with her, which I believe that he should have, especially with Cassie.
You're
He
talking
should
about
have settled
Cassandra
it.
Venturo. He settled that
Correct.
lawsuit the day after it was filed back in November of 2023.
Which was just idiotic at that point, because you don't settle it the day after it gets filed. At that point, you're at war. And really, if you settle something within a day of filing, it signals to all the wolves that I am weak and now's the time to attack. And that's what you saw. You saw a lot of lawsuits being filed. Some of them were just outrageously fantastical in terms of the accusations. Some of them could be true. Some of them might not be true. We just don't know, right? Until you get into the heart of it. But I think that opened the floodgates to allow everyone else to start suing him. And I think, like I said, this is one of those lawsuits that I think he's going to have another 3 or 4 before this is over.
Why this lawsuit, do you think that? Is it because, and I'll throw out, I was looking at the lawsuit, and as a lawyer, I was looking at some ways that you might be able to attack this. Obviously, these are very, very serious allegations, but there's a part of the lawsuit where it says defendant Combs frightened and placed plaintiff in apprehension of harm when he forced and coerced plaintiff to engage in sex work for him during his white parties from 2004 to 2009. Do you think one thing could be, is it realistic to believe that she was forced to do this for years? Is that something that you say, that might be hard to prove? But then again, I mean, how many cases, sexual assault cases have we covered where people are consistently abused for years, and maybe it takes them time to realize that they were abused, or they were in legitimate fear and felt they had no choice? But you tell me, is that one of the areas that you're looking at? I mean, why do you think that this is a case that maybe is piggybacking?
I think that's one of the reasons. When I look at a lawsuit and I see that it's over a term of years, it doesn't mean that it's not true. It raises my radar. A lot of things raise my radar when I read, different complaints, and I say to myself, like, I've dealt with victims of sex abuse. I've dealt with victims that have been trafficked. I don't just represent defendants. I've represented civil claims where this same kind of thing might have occurred. It becomes more unusual as you pile on facts, such as that it's over a period of 5 years and then nothing happens between '09 to 2024 until all these other lawsuits are filed. And then suddenly it's like, hey, you know what, ding, ding, I'm going to file a lawsuit too, because I can. I'm going to file a lawsuit too and jump on this kind of Diddy train and see if I can get my lawsuit settled. Or it could be a situation where someone said, hey, you should talk to this young lady. The Southern District of New York talks to her, and they're like, hey, I don't know if she is a sex worker or if she was abused and trafficked, and it could be on that wall. And to make sure that the Southern District understands, I shouldn't be involved in this, I shouldn't be charged, I wasn't a sex worker, I was abused, she files this lawsuit to kind of put that over the top and say, like, look, mea culpa.
Let's explore that a little bit. So obviously, right, you make it a great point that there could be people who piggyback, they come out after all these years. Another way of looking at it, of course, if somebody begins the lawsuits, if somebody comes out against a high-powered figure like a Diddy or a Harvey Weinstein or a R. Kelly, and obviously Sean Diddy Combs is not in the same realm as them, he hasn't been criminally charged, but it could give somebody the strength to come forward. But putting that to aside, I was curious of the timing, because do you think that she files this lawsuit because she is one of the witnesses who's going to testify in this grand jury, or again, assuming there is a grand jury investigating Combs, or he's the subject of the investigation? Do you think she's testified? Do you think she's spoken to them, and that is why we're now seeing this lawsuit? I think that's really interesting what you talked about.
I believe so. That's what I think that this is going. I think that individuals that are going to be called on by the Southern District of New York to come in and testify in front of a grand jury, I think as they are speaking to them, they say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I was trafficked. I was this, I was that. And then all of a sudden it kind of leads to another lawsuit. That's why I think there's going to be more lawsuits to follow. So I don't know if that happened in this case, but you see that happening in many cases where they're called in as a witness. they start going through all the things, and the the U.S. government, they start saying, hey, it sounds to me like you were trafficked. This doesn't sound like you were a sex worker. This doesn't sound like you were just getting paid to have sex or whatever. This sounds like he was doing this to you or this to you or this to you. Bells and whistles go off in those individuals' heads, and then they hire a civil attorney to file a civil lawsuit. That happens quite often as well. So you just don't know. But like I said, it raises your radar when you read these lawsuits and you start kind of questioning why it took over a period of time, why it took so long to come forward. And you're right. There's always arguments on the other side. Oh, this person was very powerful. But it wasn't like she wasn't a rapper. She wasn't a singer. She wasn't in that realm of, okay, I'm at this level of fame, and if I don't do this, he's going to blackball me. It's a very strange dynamic in that lawsuit that she's discussing, especially like that he forced her to have sex with Jacob the jeweler. Like these individuals that they're bringing in, it's very unusual.
The counter argument to that would be if you're somebody who's not very prominent and doesn't have the power, it's easier to blackball you and make sure you don't get the career or your boyfriend doesn't get the career that they were looking for. I do want your opinion about this, though, because there are a lot of people who are named in this lawsuit, a lot of companies. There are people, Jacob the jeweler, but she's also suing, I'll give everybody an idea, she's also suing Combs' associate, Tamiko Thomas, and I want everybody to listen to this description. Defendant Thomas was to defendant Combs as Ghislaine Maxwell was to Jeffrey Epstein. Without defendant Thomas, a woman using her inherent goodwill as a woman to gain the trust of another woman, coordinating and acting as an avatar for defendant Combs would be unable to execute his corrupt sex trafficking organization. So when you hear something like that, right, is that give you, again, an allegation? But there seems to be, if we're talking about what kind of case the feds might be building here, this is not the first time that someone has made a comparison to Jeffrey Epstein, right? I mean, that's a big allegation to make.
Correct. And the thing is like I said, the other thing about this lawsuit is I always look at who the lawyer is on the lawsuit as well.
Sure.
And the lawyer on this lawsuit, it's not some fly-by-night lawyer. He's a real guy. And there's, some of these lawsuits are filed by lawyers that might be newer lawyers, that might be fresh out of law school, that might be under, a certain amount of years in practice. And I look at those lawsuits differently, be it right or wrong. When a high-powered attorney or someone that you have a lot of respect for takes one of these cases, you'd hope and you usually find that they do their research before filing a federal lawsuit like this. So that's the thing that weighs against everything that I'm saying is that, there's a high-powered attorney and a respected attorney that took this case on, and you would imagine that he did some investigation prior to filing the lawsuit.
So as I mentioned, there's other people that she's suing. She's suing Vibe magazine and its parent company Penske because she claims that they helped Combs throw these parties where she was allegedly abused and trafficked, and that they allegedly exploited her in this sex trafficking conspiracy by using her likeness without her consent in a 2006 magazine issue about these parties. Bradford, I want to get into some more developments, but if you had a quick thought about that one, suing those companies as well.
I think that they kind of threw everything at the wall. I think a lot of these things will be very difficult to prove, especially like when there's sponsorship for these parties. So a lot of times you find that individual liquor companies or magazines, Maxim, any of these magazines that throw kind of like their support behind a party or support the party in a different way monetarily or just by covering it. Often you find that plaintiffs will sue those individuals saying that they have some sort of liability for it. Very difficult case to prove against those corporations and those individuals that work for those corporations, because you have to establish some sort of duty to protect and some sort of duty that they breached, especially like when they're saying, oh, she was used by them to promote these parties and things of that nature. Generally, they get releases signed. And I would imagine that if they did some sort of story on her personally, that she probably would have partook in that story willingly, and it wasn't something that she did or they did behind their back. And again, you're going to run into statute of limitations issues. You're going to run into some problems here. Sure. Even though she may have claims on some things, you're going to run into some issues, especially with some of the claims against the corporations.
Okay, so we'll see which way that lawsuit works out. But I did want to get your perspective on two other developments happening in the middle of all of this. And one To be frank with everybody, we were planning on talking to Bradford about this initially, and then the lawsuit happened, and then the subject of the investigation happened. But the first thing that we wanted to talk to you about was that it's being reported that Diddy is trying to sell his estimated multi-million-dollar Los Angeles mansion, the property that was raided by the feds. It's in the Homely Hills area of Los Angeles. TMZ reported that sources say Diddy paid $40 million for this back in 2014. He's trying to sell it for $70 million for it, trying to sell it off market. It's reportedly 17,000 square feet, 8 bedrooms, 11 bathrooms, 35-seat theater, swimming pool, swimming tunnel, basketball court. Why try to do this now, Bradford? Could it be he spends most of his time in Miami? Could it be he needs the money right now? Could it be it's bad memories from the raids? I mean, he's selling or allegedly selling this property right now in the middle of all this. Do you find it interesting?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a combination of all three, right? It could be that he spends more time in Miami than LA. That one, I think, it would be at the bottom of the list. I think more likely than not, the lawyers have told him, hey, listen, you have these 10 lawsuits. 10 lawsuits with lawyers billing on 10 lawsuits, not to mention whatever the criminal case is, you're billing out at $2,000 an hour. It's very easily you're reaching $1 million or $1.5 million a month in just lawsuit costs.
Right.
So if he can trim the fat, I think he's looking to trim the fat. If he can make a little money on a house that he doesn't use that often, I think that's why he's selling. That would be my guess. I think liquidating assets when you are facing what he's looking at right now is probably a pretty good idea. No matter how it looks to the public, you have to do what's right for you at the time. And I think what's right for him is, like I said, to trim the fat, get rid of things that he doesn't necessarily need to have and need the expense of, so he can concentrate all his effort on the resolution of these cases.
From an outward point of view, I mean, you couldn't tell that he's troubled. He's been out and about. TMZ reported that he was just in Wyoming, and there was pictures of him water rafting or river rafting with his family. I am curious, now that we know that, or at least it's been reported that he's the subject of the investigation and all this is happening, you know what question I keep getting asked all the time, Bradford? Why doesn't he just run? Why does he just pick up and go to a country where there's no extradition? People say, why didn't Harvey Weinstein do that? Why didn't somebody? Well, what would your answer be to that?
It's a multitude. It's very funny because it's not one answer is the right answer for that. Sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it's I'm not guilty, so I'm sticking where I'm sticking. A lot of times it's the government's going to find out that he's making a run for it, because a guy like that, it's very difficult to get out of the country without everyone and anyone finding out. It's not like he's Bob Smith and he can just put a mustache on and some glasses and go hit a cruise ship and take off. So it's very difficult. Is it impossible? No. But if he gets caught doing it, I think the government is prepared to just file a complaint and arrest him on the spot. And no one likes that. That is not a good look. So I think that it's probably multifaceted, but I think the biggest part of that is the government probably already let his attorneys know if he tries to make a run for it, we're prepared to just file a complaint, arrest him under a complaint, and then just hold him no bond. As opposed to if they actually file the charges towards the end of the summer, he might be eligible for a bond because he knew that these charges were coming and he never made a run for it.
Speaking bond, I have one final question for you. And I know I've hit you with a lot of different things that are happening in the Diddy saga, but clearly a lot is happening. So Roger Bonds, this is Combs' former bodyguard, appeared on this program called Vlad TV and said, quote, "If I get subpoenaed, I'm not going to jail for nobody." And then he doubled down on that he would testify even if he were promised he wouldn't get in trouble. I can't say that I'm going to be an advocate for one thing and then not stand up for another thing. So if I say that he's evil and I say all these things about him, if I was just one of those people that went back in my corner and sat down, then I'm continuing for this to keep going on and on. I'm showing this person that they're just as powerful as they think they was. Anything I can do to help these women, I would do. That's quite a statement. What do you make of it?
I think that, again, when you look at ex-employees, and I'm looking at this from the defense perspective, when you look at ex-employees, a lot of times they have a bone to pick with an individual. They weren't paid enough. They weren't paid the right thing. Who knows? But that being said, I think it's very dangerous if there's someone who is your right-hand man bodyguard, and if they've witnessed things and they've seen things, and now they're willing to come in and testify, especially when you speak. If you're speaking freely in a car and you have your bodyguard there and he's overhearing things, that's always dangerous because he can testify to a lot of different things. And it's hard to say that didn't happen. It's hard to say, hey, listen, even though he was in the car, that wasn't said. What is the flip side to that is that, these bodyguards that see things or witness things and they don't come forward at the time, but now they want to come forward. Now they want to protect women. Now they want to do all these things. That's the other side of that coin. But again, you could say he was so powerful, this guy would have never worked in the business again. There's defenses to everything, but it's not good. It's not good when a bodyguard wants to come forward.
And assuming the allegations against Diddy, all the allegations are true, and if he was a part of this, if he was a participant, then I would imagine he'd have to work out some sort of deal, an immunity deal, to testify, because then he'd be just as guilty, right?
Right, and I think that's why he's saying I'm not going to go to jail for anybody.
Right.
Because I think that most of the people that are involved and most of the people that were around him at the time, I think are all very nervous that somehow, some way, the Southern District of New York would put them involved in everything else. And I think that's why they sent him a subject letter, not a target letter, because it could be that there's multiple subjects.
I think that's a very fair assessment. Again, he's innocent until proven guilty. These are allegations. He hasn't been arrested, hasn't been criminally charged, hasn't been found liable in a court of law. But fascinating updates nonetheless. And how great is Bradford Cohen? Breaking down everything about what's going on here. I threw so much at him. Bradford, thank you so much for your expertise, your insight, and your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.